Leo Taxel, can you elaborate on some Scientology conspiracy theories? Internal ones like the IRS takeover, and external such as Hubbard's bankers. Okay, well, I'll comment on these two, and let's see where that goes. In terms of the IRS conspiracy theory, this is like you mentioned, sort of a internal one. I guess by that, yeah, I'm not really sure exactly what you mean by internal, but how I interpret that is the IRS takeover is an outside of Scientology conspiracy theory. Within the world of Scientology, there's no conspiracy theory connected with their tax exemption. The IRS finally reviewed the matter and did the right thing. That's what Scientologists think about it. But outside the church, there's this idea that the IRS commissioner was blackmailed by Miscavige and Marty Rathbun, who went into his office and had some long talk with him. And I forget the guy's name, Jeffrey something, I think. But anyway, they went in, had this meeting. And I have said in my book and on video that I don't believe that they tried to blackmail him in terms of a personal level of blackmail. I don't think they dug up some dirt on the IRS commissioner and then threatened to release it if he wouldn't give them tax exemption. I think it was a bit more easy and obvious than that, where they brought thousands of lawsuits against individual IRS agents. They had a years-long PR campaign going against the IRS. Miscavige literally made a video endorsing CATS, the Citizens for an Alternative Tax System, which was an idea being put forward originally not by Scientologists, but the church glommed onto this while they were doing their anti-IRS campaign in the late 1980s. And they were pushing for a value-added tax system to take over or replace the income tax system of the United States. Not really a very viable or realistic idea, but at the time when the IRS was getting trounced in the media, there were Senate investigations because of this. Scientology's Freedom Magazine was posting monthly articles about abusive IRS agents beating up on people and abusing them over their taxes, which were all true enough. And they were really lambasting the IRS in the public eye. And the IRS knew where this was coming from, and they knew that they were in a full-on war, and they were doing their part to try to, maintain that Scientology did not deserve tax exemption. But this battle started really wearing down their resources. So anyway, I think that's all I need to say on that for this answer here. Like I said, I've laid it all out in detail in my book, so you can check that out. But there's really there was no necessary, it wasn't necessary that they blackmail the IRS commissioner with personal dirt. They had this whole, offensive that they were doing. And when I said it went on for years because Scientology knew that if they didn't get that tax exemption, it was game over for them. And that was why they fought with every resource they had. So then as far as commenting on the external conspiracy theories, all right, now I've made videos about this. I've gone into real detail about how the conspiracy theories within Scientology work. But I thought for this time, since we're taking it up in a Q&A show, I would actually just read to you from the scriptures like I did last week with some of the LGBT stuff. I thought, let me just give it to you straight from L. Ron Hubbard. And you can get where this conspiracy mindset comes from, because it comes from the very top. And here is what L. Ron Hubbard said in a lecture he gave, or a briefing really, called RJ 67, or Ron's Journal 67. And if I remember right, this was first published in 20 September 1967. And I've highlighted an applicable portion here. Hubbard goes on. In this lecture is where he first publicly announces the Sea Organization as an entity. He says, hey, I've been out on these boats. I've got these OTs with me. We are doing the Sea Project or Sea Organization. And I thought I'd tell everybody in the world here what's up. And this is the first time that a lot of people had heard from Hubbard in over a year. most of 1967 and the later part of 66, Hubbard had turned stuff over, gone off on these boats with this select group of people, and nobody heard from him or even knew where he was. So this briefing was the first sort of, hey, I'm here, and here's what's going on. And then he drops this bomb about how the Scientology had been being fought by governments for years, and he talks about in 1966 he had gone to South Africa, and he went down there to see if they might find an alternate safe place for Scientology down in Africa, since he'd already fled from the United States and now was getting, the boot from the UK. There was a ban on Scientologists going into the country, and there was all kinds of government trouble. So he goes down to South Africa. Well, he's only down there for a little bit before he gets his visa revoked, and he's getting in trouble with the local authorities, and they didn't want him down there, and he got kicked out. So here's what he says. Quote, with all of this action being taken against us in the last 17 years, I found after the South African matter that it was vitally necessary that I isolate who it was on this planet who was attacking us. The attacks were always of the same pattern. They always followed the same newspaper routes. They always used the same type of parliamentary member. And I thought that I had better look into this very thoroughly. The organization, under the direction of Mary Sue, employed, and actually had employed earlier than I had returned from Southern Africa, employed several professional intelligence agents who had long and successful professional backgrounds, and they looked into this matter for us, and the results of their activities, although still in progress, have told us all that we needed to know with regard to any enemy we had on this planet. Our enemies on this planet are less than 12 men. They are members of the Bank of England and other higher financial circles. They own and control newspaper chains, and they are, oddly enough, directors in all the mental health groups in the world which have sprung up. Now, these chaps are very interesting fellows. They have fantastically corrupt backgrounds, illegitimate children, government graft, a very unsavory lot. And they apparently, sometime in the rather distant past, had determined on a course of action. Being in control of most of the gold supplies of the planet, they entered upon a program of bringing every government to bankruptcy and under their thumb, so that no government would be able to act politically without their permission. The rest of their apparent program was to use mental health, which is to say psychiatric electric shock and prefrontal lobotomy, to remove from their path any political dissenters. They were the people behind the Siberia Bill, which almost passed the House of Representatives in the United States and did pass, if I remember rightly, the Senate, which gave the power to any governor of any state in the United States simply to pick up anyone on the street and send him to Alaska. We defeated this Siberia Bill and many other mental health quote-unquote acts of this character, but never really before knew from whom they were coming. Anyway, these fellows have gotten nearly every government in the world to owe them considerable quantities of money through various chicaneries, and they control, of course, income tax, government finance. Wilson, for instance, the current Premier of England, is totally involved with these fellows and talks about nothing else, actually. They organize these mental health groups which sprang up simultaneously all over the world, and anything that has mental health in its name, or mental hygiene, or other things of that character, such names as that are all part of the organization, which stems from these less than a dozen really men. Now, this is very interesting because we innocently moved forward in 1950 and came straight across this very, very broad plot. If there was a cure to mental illness, then people would say you had better send him to an auditor and would begin to ask questions if someone was electric shocked or given a prefrontal lobotomy. For as only by electric shock and prefrontal lobotomies could they effectively remove their political enemies or objectors. And he says a little bit more about how crazy these guys are. And he says here, I'll leave with this last paragraph. They have failed in nearly every part of their mission except this one of making every government bankrupt and owe them fantastic sums. Now, these chaps control newspaper chains through one of their number. Sir, I don't know if it's Sir, but it's Cecil King. And these newspaper chains go down into Southern Africa, they go into Australia, they go into, of course, all parts of the world. And this newspaper chain was what was being used to give us a bad name. It was very interesting that the only effort they only ever made was simply to discredit us. That is what they could be counted upon to do, simply discredit us and discredit the workability. There is no faintest doubt in their minds that our technology does work, because many other such activities as Subud and so forth have gone on unmolested by them. It is the only intensely workable technology of Scientology which has attracted their ire. Okay, end quote. So you pretty much see the bones, the framework of the conspiracy laid out for you there. It is the bankers, it is psychiatry, it is they who control and own governments by bankrupting them and loaning them money, I suppose. So this, of course, brings in the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and this quickly connects dots to the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, and to the various organizations that, the Bilderbergers and these sort of trilateral commission, these famous early 1970 groups that everybody was, none dare call it conspiracy. Well, Hubbard did dare to call it conspiracy before that book was even published. And he fed this line to Scientologists that this Siberia bill, for example, if you were wondering what that was about, it was Hubbard's misinterpretation and hysteria, really, about a bill that meant to create some mental health facilities up in Alaska. And instead, they interpreted this to mean, as you read there, as I read to you, any governor of any state could simply grab anybody off the street and send them to up to Alaska, when they'll never be heard from again, and this kind of nonsense. Hubbard loved this crap. And in fact, I talked about the Ron magazines in the last question. Well, here is one of them. This is a hardback version of Ron, the Freedom Fighter, articles and essays. And this is a pretty thick manuscript here, and it is chock-a-block full of articles that Hubbard wrote, most of them in the late 1960s, which created the Freedom Magazine, which was a publication of Scientology, of the Office of Special Affairs. And he forwards a lot more of this conspiratorial type thinking in his articles that he wrote and essays he wrote for Freedom Magazine in this book. So if you're really, really curious about it, then, get a copy of this thing and read it, and you'll get exactly how far down the rabbit hole Hubbard's thinking goes. And he brings all the Scientologists along with him who have any interest in this stuff, and quite a few of them do. Not everybody, by a long shot. There are many, many Scientologists who don't care at all about this stuff. But all Scientologists pretty much are going to hear RJ67 at least at one point. And many of the essays and articles in the Freedom Magazine or in the Freedom Fighter Ron magazine are things that, our Scientologists are encouraged to read. So it's easy to, get exposure to this information as a Scientologist and start going down the conspiracy mind trap, the little mind virus that is conspiracy theories. It's not that all the things that Hubbard talks about are all false. That's the thing about conspiracy theories that are so insidious, is some of the facts that are brought up are true facts. Some of the conclusions are true conclusions, but often many of the facts, while they might be true, don't logically lead to the conclusions that the conspiracy theorists are making. And that's where you see all the logical fallacies and pitfalls of going down the Alex Jones, David Icke rabbit holes. is it's not like everything they say is wrong and false. It's that their conclusions are usually, kind of crazy because they connect dots that don't connect and things like that. Hubbard was the original conspiracy theorist on this stuff. I mean, he predates Jones, Ike, none dare call it conspiracy, a lot of this stuff. He's obviously not the first conspiracy theorist, but as far as the world of Scientology goes, he was definitely a trendsetter on that. So that's where the Scientology mindset is. That's why. And I hope that answered that question a bit.